The device in your hand might carry a different logo. It could be an iPhone, a Google Pixel, a Xiaomi flagship, or one of countless other smartphones used by millions of people every day. But what if I told you that behind many of these products lies technology built by the very company competing against them? This is a hidden side of Samsung that most people never see. Today, Samsung is recognized as one of the world's most valuable technology companies. Every year, it generates more than KRW 333 trillion in revenue, employs hundreds of thousands of people across the globe, and operates one of the most advanced manufacturing networks ever created. To most consumers, however, Samsung is simply the company that makes Galaxy smartphones and televisions. But that assumption hides a much bigger story. Behind the scenes, Samsung has spent decades building an empire that reaches far beyond the products carrying its own logo. From advanced memory chips and OLED displays to semiconductor technology, AI hardware, batteries, and next-generation manufacturing, Samsung has quietly become one of the invisible forces driving the modern technology industry. In different products and at different times, many of the world's biggest technology companies have sourced critical components from Samsung while competing against it in the marketplace. That raises a fascinating question. How did one company become powerful enough to compete with the world's biggest technology brands, while simultaneously helping build the technology inside many of their products? The answer isn't hidden inside a smartphone. It isn't found in a marketing campaign. And it certainly didn't happen overnight. It began more than 80 years ago with a small trading business in Korea, a founder who believed that industries, not products, create lasting power, and a series of bold business decisions that quietly transformed Samsung into one of the most influential technology empires the modern world has ever seen. This is the untold business secret behind Samsung's technology empire. When people hear the name Samsung, one image usually comes to mind: a smartphone. Walk into any electronics store and you'll see rows of Galaxy devices, massive televisions, sleek home appliances, and smart gadgets carrying the familiar blue logo. To billions of consumers, Samsung is simply another technology brand competing with Apple, Xiaomi, Google, and dozens of other electronics companies. But that perception only scratches the surface of a much bigger story. Because Samsung isn't just competing in the technology industry. In many ways, it is quietly helping build it. Every single day, billions of people use devices that depend on technologies Samsung has spent decades developing. Long before artificial intelligence became the biggest trend in Silicon Valley, Samsung was investing billions into semiconductor research. Long before foldable smartphones became reality, the company had already built one of the world's most advanced display businesses. And while the world focused on flashy product launches, Samsung was strengthening something even more valuable: its manufacturing ecosystem. This is the difference between building products and building an empire. Today, Samsung generates more than KRW 333 trillion in annual revenue and operates businesses that stretch across semiconductors, memory chips, OLED displays, consumer electronics, smartphones, batteries, advanced manufacturing, and artificial intelligence. Few companies on Earth control so many critical parts of the modern technology supply chain. But here's something even more fascinating. Some of Samsung's toughest competitors have, at different times and for different products, sourced key components from Samsung itself. Companies may compete fiercely on store shelves, yet behind the scenes they sometimes buy technology from the very rival they're trying to outperform. It sounds like a contradiction, but in business, the most successful companies don't always choose sides. They build ecosystems. That's where Samsung's real power begins. Most businesses earn money by selling finished products. Samsung mastered something far more difficult. It learned how to create value at multiple levels of the same industry. Instead of relying on a single product, the company gradually built expertise in research, manufacturing, engineering, logistics, component production, and consumer brands. This strategy, known today as vertical integration, gave Samsung greater control over quality, innovation, production speed, and long-term profitability. While competitors often depended on outside suppliers, Samsung invested in becoming its own supplier wherever possible. But strategies like this don't appear overnight. They are built through decades of difficult decisions. To understand why Samsung became one of the most influential technology companies in history, we have to travel back to a Korea that looked nothing like the country we know today. In 1938, South Korea wasn't a global technology leader. It wasn't famous for innovation, semiconductors, or electronics. The country was still under Japanese colonial rule. Its economy was fragile, industries were limited, and opportunities for entrepreneurs were scarce. Few people could have imagined that one of the world's greatest technology companies would emerge from such uncertain circumstances. Amid this environment stood a young entrepreneur named Lee Byung-chul. He wasn't launching a technology company. He wasn't designing smartphones. He wasn't dreaming about artificial intelligence. His first business was much simpler. He established a small trading company that dealt with everyday goods such as dried fish, vegetables, and noodles, exporting products to nearby markets. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary trading business with modest ambitions. But Lee Byung-chul saw something others didn't. He believed that true business success wasn't created by chasing quick profits. It came from building systems that could grow stronger over time. Instead of asking, "What product can I sell today?" he asked a much more powerful question: what industries will shape tomorrow? That difference in thinking would eventually define Samsung's future. As global markets changed and Korea's economy evolved, Lee understood that surviving meant adapting. A company that depended on only one business could disappear overnight. A company that learned to evolve could survive almost anything. That philosophy became Samsung's greatest competitive advantage. Long before business schools popularized terms like diversification and long-term strategy, Samsung was already putting those ideas into practice. The company expanded carefully, entering new industries one after another. Not because expansion looked impressive, but because every new business added another layer of resilience. Each step reduced risk, created new capabilities, and prepared Samsung for opportunities that most people couldn't even see yet. Looking back today, it's easy to admire Samsung's success. What's much harder to appreciate is how uncertain every decision looked at the time. There was no guarantee that diversification would work. There was no guarantee that Korea would become an industrial powerhouse. And there was certainly no guarantee that a small trading company would one day influence the global technology industry. Yet the foundations of Samsung's future empire were already being laid. Not through luck, but through patience, discipline, and an obsession with thinking decades ahead instead of quarters ahead. That mindset would soon face its first major test. Because history was about to throw Korea into war, economic devastation, and political uncertainty. For most companies, it would have meant the end. For Samsung, that IT became the beginning of something much bigger. If Samsung's story had ended as a small trading company, history would have forgotten its name. But great companies are rarely shaped during times of comfort. They are forged in moments when survival itself becomes uncertain. And for Samsung, that moment arrived far sooner than anyone expected. Only a few years after Lee Byung-chul founded the company, Korea was thrown into one of the most turbulent periods in its history. Political instability, the end of Japanese rule, and eventually the Korean War devastated the country's economy. Cities were destroyed, infrastructure collapsed, businesses disappeared, and millions of families struggled simply to survive. For most entrepreneurs, this would have been the end of the journey. For Lee Byung-chul, it became the moment that completely changed the way he thought about business. He realized that surviving in an unpredictable world required far more than selling successful products. A business built around a single market could disappear overnight, but a company capable of adapting to changing industries could survive almost any crisis. That simple realization would eventually become one of Samsung's greatest business secrets. Instead of rebuilding the same trading business he had started years earlier, Lee began expanding into industries that many people believed had nothing to do with each other. At first glance, the decisions looked confusing. Samsung entered food processing, sugar refining, textiles, insurance, retail, construction, and chemicals. To outsiders, it appeared as though the company lacked focus. In reality, Lee was following a strategy decades ahead of its time. Every new industry gave Samsung another source of income. Every factory created new manufacturing experience. Every expansion reduced dependence on a single business. While many companies were trying to become the best in one category, Samsung was quietly building capabilities across an entire economy. This wasn't random diversification. It was calculated resilience. Looking back today, we often admire companies because they dominate a single industry. But Lee understood something even more important. Industries change. Consumer preferences change. Technology changes. Governments change. A company that cannot adapt eventually disappears. Samsung wasn't preparing for the next year. It was preparing for the next generation. As South Korea slowly began rebuilding its economy, the government launched ambitious industrialization programs designed to transform the country from an agricultural economy into a global manufacturing powerhouse. Large business groups, later known as chaebols, played a central role in this transformation. Samsung became one of the companies that expanded rapidly during this period, taking advantage of opportunities created by economic reforms, infrastructure investment, and growing international trade. But while many businesses focus on immediate profits, Samsung invested in something much more valuable: capability. Factories could be built, machines could be purchased, but engineering knowledge, manufacturing expertise, and organizational discipline took years to develop. Lee understood that every new business was teaching Samsung how to solve bigger problems. Every challenge became another lesson. Every failure became another investment. This philosophy slowly transformed Samsung from a trading company into an industrial organization capable of operating at enormous scale. Yet perhaps the boldest decision was still ahead. During the 1960s, consumer electronics represented a risky industry. Producing televisions, radios, and electronic devices required advanced engineering, significant capital, and long-term research. Global competition was already fierce, with established Japanese companies setting the standard for quality and innovation. Many would have considered entering this market too dangerous. Samsung saw something different. It saw the future. The company understood that technology would eventually become the foundation of modern life. Electronics were no longer luxury products. They would become necessities. The businesses capable of mastering advanced manufacturing today would dominate tomorrow's economy. So, in 1969, Samsung made one of the most important decisions in its entire history. It entered the electronics business. At the time, almost nobody could predict where that decision would lead. The first products were relatively simple: black and white televisions, home appliances, and basic consumer electronics. There was nothing revolutionary about them. Samsung wasn't the world's most innovative electronics company. It wasn't the market leader. In many areas, it was still learning, but that was never the real objective. The real objective was experience. Every television assembled improved manufacturing processes. Every production line trained engineers. Every customer complaint revealed weaknesses. Every product became another step towards something much bigger. This is where Samsung's long-term philosophy separated it from many competitors. Most companies enter industries hoping to make money quickly. Samsung entered industries to build knowledge. That difference changed everything. Years later, when smartphones, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and advanced displays became trillion-dollar industries, Samsung wasn't starting from zero. It had already spent decades building engineering expertise, manufacturing infrastructure, and research capabilities, while many competitors were still focused on short-term market opportunities. The seeds of today's technology empire were planted long before anyone had ever heard the word smartphone or artificial intelligence. But despite these bold investments, Samsung was still far from becoming the global giant we know today. Its electronics division faced intense international competition. Its products were often viewed as lower quality than those of established global brands. And one critical business decision, one that seemed incredibly risky at the time, would determine whether Samsung became just another electronics manufacturer or one of the most powerful technology companies in history. That decision wasn't about televisions. It wasn't about home appliances. It was about a tiny piece of silicon that most people never see, the semiconductor. And that single decision would change not only Samsung's future, but the future of the entire technology industry. By the early 1980s, Samsung had already transformed itself from a trading company into one of South Korea's fastest-growing industrial groups. It was manufacturing televisions, home appliances, and consumer electronics on a massive scale. From the outside, it looked like another ambitious electronics company trying to compete with established Japanese brands. But behind closed doors, Samsung was making a decision that would redefine its future and quietly reshape the global technology industry. That decision was semiconductors. At the time, very few people understood how important semiconductor chips would become. They were small, expensive to develop, incredibly difficult to manufacture, and required years of research before becoming profitable. Most companies preferred buying chips from specialized suppliers rather than building their own production facilities. Samsung took the opposite approach. Instead of relying on someone else's technology, it invested billions of dollars into designing and manufacturing its own memory chips. It was an enormous financial gamble. Factories cost billions. Research required thousands of highly skilled engineers. Profits were uncertain, and global competition was already intense. To many business analysts, Samsung was taking an unnecessary risk. But Samsung wasn't thinking about the next 5 years. It was thinking about the next 50. That long-term mindset became the foundation of its greatest competitive advantage. As personal computers, mobile phones, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and data centers expanded around the world, the demand for memory chips exploded. Suddenly, the technology that once looked like an expensive experiment became one of the world's most valuable industries. Samsung wasn't trying to catch up. It was already there. This is where Samsung's hidden business model becomes truly fascinating. Most people believe Samsung became rich because it sells Galaxy smartphones. In reality, smartphones represent only one part of an enormous business ecosystem. Behind every smartphone launch is a far more complex operation involving semiconductor fabrication, display manufacturing, memory production, batteries, image sensors, software optimization, logistics, and global supply chains. Samsung doesn't simply manufacture finished products. It manufactures the technology that makes those products possible. That strategy is called vertical integration. Instead of depending entirely on outside suppliers, Samsung built expertise across multiple stages of production, designing components, manufacturing them, assembling products, and continuously improving research gave the company greater control over quality, costs, innovation, and speed. While many competitors depended heavily on external suppliers, Samsung invested in becoming one of the world's largest suppliers itself. And that's why the company occupies such a unique position in the technology industry. In different products and at different times, many leading technology companies have sourced Samsung-made components, including memory chips, OLED displays, storage solutions, batteries, or other technologies. At the same time, those very companies have competed directly against Samsung in smartphones, consumer electronics, and other markets. It sounds unusual, but in modern business, companies often compete in one area while partnering in another. Samsung mastered that balance better than almost anyone else. This strategy also protected the company during difficult market cycles. If smartphone sales slowed, other business divisions could continue generating revenue. If one industry experienced weaker demand, another could offset the decline. Instead of depending on a single product, Samsung had created an ecosystem where multiple businesses supported one another. Today, that ecosystem is one of the company's greatest strengths. Samsung now operates advanced semiconductor fabrication facilities, display manufacturing plants, research centers, design laboratories, AI development programs, battery businesses, consumer electronics divisions, and one of the largest smartphone operations in the world. Its technologies help power cloud computing, artificial intelligence, data centers, automotive electronics, home appliances, televisions, medical devices, and countless consumer products. The numbers reflect the scale of that achievement. Samsung generates approximately KRW 333.6 trillion in annual revenue, while producing an operating profit of approximately KRW 43.6 trillion. These results are driven not only by flagship Galaxy smartphones, but also by strong demand for memory chips, advanced semiconductors, AI-related hardware, premium displays, and other high-value technologies that serve customers across the global electronics industry. Yet, perhaps Samsung's greatest achievement cannot be measured on a financial statement. Its greatest achievement is the system it built. For more than 8 decades, Samsung has continuously invested in engineering, research, manufacturing, and long-term innovation. Rather than chasing short-term trends, the company repeatedly prepared for industries that did not yet exist. That philosophy explains why Samsung has remained relevant through multiple generations of technological change. From televisions to personal computers, from feature phones to smartphones, from semiconductors to artificial intelligence. The company's history teaches an important lesson. Great businesses rarely become global leaders because they create one successful product. They become global leaders because they create systems capable of producing innovation again and again. Samsung's story isn't really about smartphones. It isn't even about semiconductors. It's about vision. The vision to invest when others hesitated. The patience to think in decades instead of quarters. And the discipline to build capabilities before the world fully understood their value. Today, billions of people recognize Samsung's logo. But very few recognize the invisible network of factories, engineers, researchers, laboratories, and supply chains working behind that logo every single day. That is the real business secret behind Samsung's technology empire. It isn't built on one product. It isn't built on one invention. It is built on decades of strategic thinking, relentless innovation, manufacturing excellence, and the courage to make difficult decisions long before they become obvious. And perhaps that is the biggest lesson of all. The companies that shape the future are rarely the ones chasing today's headlines. They're the ones quietly building tomorrow's foundations long before the rest of the world realizes what is coming. Samsung's journey proves that the world's greatest companies aren't built overnight. They are built through decades of difficult decisions, relentless innovation, and the courage to invest in a future that most people can't yet imagine. While others focus on selling products, Samsung focused on building industries. While competitors chase today's market, Samsung quietly prepared for tomorrow's technology. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson every entrepreneur, business owner, and dreamer can learn from this story. Real success doesn't come from thinking bigger than everyone else. It comes from thinking further than everyone else. If you enjoyed this documentary and learned something new about the hidden business strategy behind Samsung's technology empire, make sure to support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. We create premium business documentaries that uncover the untold stories, strategies, and decisions behind the world's biggest companies, luxury brands, and billion-dollar empires. Now, we'd love to hear your opinion. What do you think is Samsung's greatest strength today? Is it its semiconductor dominance, its manufacturing ecosystem, its relentless innovation, or its long-term business strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every comment, and your perspective could inspire our next documentary.